Hello. In this video, we're going to walk through the process of integrating your Nutanix Calm instance to a ServiceNow developer instance. We will go through the process of setting up a dev instance from scratch, all the way to provisioning a catalog item inside ServiceNow. This video is following the steps from our admin guide, which is linked in the description below. The first step is to go to developer.servicenow.com and request a free instance. Anyone can sign up and get a free instance to test and play with the ServiceNow platform. I'm logged into my account at developer.servicenow.com. Now let's click on Manage, and here is where we can request a free instance. I'm going to request version London for my setup. However, the plugin does support the latest two releases, London and Madrid, for integration. After I've requested my instance, the first step is to take the auto-generated password from ServiceNow and log in, and let's set our own password for this instance. Now, with my password set, I'm in a clean instance with nothing configured and all ready to go. The first housekeeping things I like to do with the new instance is go under Action and hit Remove Demo Data. ServiceNow includes a bunch of fake users and projects and policies. To give you an example data set, I like to remove them so things stay cleaner in your dev instance. The next step we need to do is create a mid server and a mid user to access this server. So in ServiceNow, if I head to the users table and hit new user, I'm going to create a user called mid user to keep things simple. This is the user that's going to run the actual mid server inside of ServiceNow. After I've created the user, I'm going to go back to this user, mid user, and I'm going to click on edit roles. There is a built-in role called mid server that will give this user rights to execute mid server functions. So under collection, we can type in mid, select mid server, bring it over to the roles list, and hit save. Now that I have my user in place, I can build my actual mid server. For mid server, it can be on Linux or Windows. For this example, I'm going to use a CentOS 7 VM. Over in Calm, I'm going to order myself a VM from my marketplace to install my mid server. After a few minutes, my mid server VM will be up, and I can SSH to this VM and pull down the package and install the mid server. The mid server is what allows Nutanix Calm to interface with the ServiceNow SaaS instance over the internet. So now that I have my VM, I will SSH into my Linux VM. Following the ServiceNow documentation, the first step is going to be to create a folder for ServiceNow at /ServiceNow/ the name of the server /agent. I'm also going to adjust the permissions on this folder to allow the local Nutanix user full rights over this folder. Back in my ServiceNow instance, if we search for mid server inside the tables, we can find the downloads for the actual mid server bits. So I'm going to copy the link for the Linux 64-bit mid server and then pull those bits down to my VM. After I pull the bits down, I'm going to extract the zip file and then copy it to the directory we created in the prior step. Once it's moved into directory, the first step is to edit the config file to point it to our ServiceNow instance. So I'm going to bring up a Vim session to our config.xml. Inside the config.xml, there's three parameters we need to change. First parameter is going to be the URL of your instance. So we can just pop over and pull in the name of our instance. The next parameter is going to be the mid-instance username and password. That's the username and password we created on the prior step. And last, the host name of the actual mid server that we've built. Now, with the file saved, we can start the mid server by executing a shell script. If the mid server started correctly, now we can run the install script to make sure that the start script runs on every boot. Great, so now our mid server is running successfully. Over in ServiceNow, if we head to the list of mid servers, we can see our newly created mid server showing up in the ServiceNow configuration. Now, before we can use this mid server for our Nutanix Calm plugin, it needs to be validated. Validated will turn it on and allow services in ServiceNow to now utilize this mid server. After your mid server is validated, the next step is to configure your LDAP and AD connection in ServiceNow. We do need to connect to the same LDAP or AD directory as your Prism Central Calm instance. So under LDAP, I'm going to come to Create New Server. Here I'm going to add my server name, my LDAP URL, and the base search directory of where I'm going to search for my AD users and groups. After I've created my LDAP server, now I need to give it credentials to access the domain. Now you'll notice we add the credentials, the connection is still going to fail. That's because the SaaS off instance does not have access to your internal network. So we stop the listener, and this will allow us to select the mid server that we created in our prior step. So after we select the mid server, we can update the AD connection and start the listener back. Now with our proper mid server selected, we hit test connection and we can see that ServiceNow can now communicate with our Active Directory instance. So now that Active Directory is configured, we want to head over to scheduled loads and execute an import of all the AD groups and users. So if we click on each scheduled job, AD groups import, execute now, this will execute a job in the background to synchronize all your LDAP groups. And we'll do the same with our AD users execute script. Now, if we want to use emails to say, hey, your servers are ready or your build failed, we need to configure an email address to send and a few other properties here. For testing purposes, I usually put in my email address to make sure things are working well. So now with email and LDAP configured, now we can install the actual plugin. To install the plugin, we need to head over to System Update Sets and retrieve update sets. Here we click on Import Update Set from XML. This XML file can be downloaded from the Nutanix GitHub repository, and it includes everything needed to deploy the plugin. After we upload the plugin, we need to preview the update set, which will look at everything and make sure there's no errors. So if we click on Preview Update Set, it's going to analyze everything, and it's pretty common if there's one or two errors. That's not a problem. All we have to do is when we get this list of errors, look at the error and click on Accept Remote Update, and that will resolve that error. Once we've addressed all the problems, now we can run Commit Update Set, which will finish installing the plugin. With the plugin installed, now we need to follow a step from our admin guide, which is assigning certain permissions to some tables. So in the documentation guide, there's a list of around 7 tables that we need to click on and assign application access to these tables. I'm going to speed the video up here after doing the first table, which shows you just to set all the properties and hit update. And I'm going to speed through and finish the rest of the tables. Okay, now we've finished updating all the table permissions as per the documentation. So the next step is I'm going to take my user account and I'm going to assign some roles to it to make myself the Calm administrator, the one who can administer all things related to Calm from the plugin. These roles are listed in the administration guide. Now that my user account is ready, it's time to actually configure the plugin. So now we have a bunch of new Nutanix tables provided to us by the plugin. The first step is to go to Application Properties and configure the plugin. Now, an important thing is during the configuration of the plugin, we have to actually be in the Nutanix Calm application. So under Preferences, we can enable the application scope for Nutanix Calm. Once I'm in the application scope for Nutanix Calm, I can select the mid server that we created to allow us access to our Calm instance, our version of Calm, administrator credentials to our Calm instance. Approval workflows, here we can set any existing ITSM workflows that you want to use. The plugin, there's an auto approve workflow available that you can use. And now we need to assign the group that is actually considered the approvers. So on the Calm instance, now I can add my URL to my Calm instance, and we do need to add the port number to this URL. Under Properties, I'm going to make sure Create Incidents is checked to auto raise incidents if we have a build failure. Now the plugin's configured, I can head back to my global application scope. Now the first step we need to do after we've configured the plugin is run a synchronization job. The plugin will automatically sync all of our projects, blueprints, running applications, marketplace items into ServiceNow. This can take up to 5 or 10 minutes, your first initial sync. It is scheduled to run every 24 hours, but under the scheduled jobs, we can tweak that to any time that we need, and we can also execute it manually. After our synchronization is finished and we have all of our artifacts inside ServiceNow, now we can go to creating catalog items. In my next video, we will walk through how to use the plugin and how to order applications through the ServiceNow catalog into Calm. Thanks for watching, and I hope this was helpful.